So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're able to tune in to this In Conversation with episode. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Dr. Viv Sabel. Viv, it's an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you again. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. It's lovely to see you, and thank you for inviting me to come along and have another little chat with you.
It's been a while since we did one of these, and I think the last time we actually sat down for one of these conversations, Siobhan and I were overseas.
You were in Borneo.
Yes, and it was, I think, the first conversation that we did from overseas, and the feedback and the overall impact of that conversation was phenomenal. So I'm really looking forward to this one, because we've got a bit of a kind of different focus this time round, and looking at education and the support of professionals coming into the therapeutic arena.
Fantastic.
It's something that, when we first met, you were coming to the end of your studying for your doctorate, and you were APA's first member with a doctorate.
Yay!
It was, I can remember that, all of that energy and everything else when that happened. It was absolutely phenomenal. And again, I love the way that you have taken all of your experience and your knowledge, and you're now sharing that with students that are going through the process of becoming a therapeutic professional. But what are you enjoying most about that?
So I've been in training and teaching psychotherapy for probably longer than I know. Um, for the last 2 years, based at a university. Prior to that, I did 2 or 3 years with the Psychotherapy Institute. So I've been heavily involved with that. For me, what I enjoy about that is the relational side of that practice, that teaching. For me, it's not just about ticking boxes, meeting academic criteria. It's about looking at the person, the trainee, and them understanding their own process and how that it will impact on their work when they finish. So for me, if I'm going to have a small part in someone's training, I want them to have sorted their stuff out, or to be at least fully accepting of their own process, of their own stuff.
Yeah. And it's that self-awareness that is so fundamental in effective delivery of support, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that one of the things that I've been charged with teaching is personal professional development. And for me, that's probably one of the most significant parts of training, alongside attending personal therapy, which I think is essential, and understanding your own process. Being in a PPD group and understanding your own triggers, and realizing that by understanding what might play out in that group will have probably played out in your family dynamics, in your other relational dynamics, and needs to be understood fully and embraced in order not to pass that over to your client. So if you're defensive in practice, then you're dealing with your own stuff. You need to be able to put your hands up and say to your client, I think I got that wrong. I'm really sorry.
And it's that kind of awareness of our own triggers that, and you've heard us speak, or Siobhan and I speak, about the invisible scalpel of therapy, probably for longer than most of our members have. But it is very, very true that as our education system becomes more bums on seats, completion of courses, and then additional cost for competencies, etc., as a separate factor. And that's something that's only kind of come about in the last sort of decade or so. The personal awareness, that personal therapy, and the importance of that has almost kind of dropped down the academic importance scale. But you're bringing that right to the fore, aren't you?
I think it's paramount. I think as professionals working with other people's psyches, other people's stuff, other people's mental health, it is 100% essential that we fully understand and have a real grip on our own process, because we can cause damage to others by not understanding ourselves fully.
Yeah, and that's that invisible scalpel, isn't it? And when you have that awareness of the impact that you can have by simply understanding your own triggers and having those mechanisms in place to protect yourself ultimately, because you're being triggered. And it's how, you know, having those systems in place. And this is where a voluntary support platform really does come into its own, because that's your safety net, isn't it?
Yeah. And voluntary support platforms, membership organizations could have a significant role in understanding the importance of that. It's not simply about gathering data, being academically fulfilled. It's not about academia. It's not just about the learning. It's about learning of self. I mean, literally, I could go on and on and on and on about this. So it's going to be quite tricky to shut me up.
Well,
but it is so important. Honestly, it's like, if you don't understand yourself, you're not ready to go out there. If that's not part of the training, then that, for me, that training is not good enough.
Yeah, and this is where the endorsed learning collection that APA is putting together really does come into its own, by highlighting those institutions, those colleges that are providing that kind of almost an insistence on having that personal therapy and having that awareness of self, but also making sure that the voluntary support platform that a student affiliates to is effective for that student rather than effective for that institution.
Yeah, and I think that, again, is really important. If you ask a student what they might get from a membership organization, or what they might want from a membership organization, it seems that those answers are radically different. So one of the things that membership organizations like yourself offer, you know, the sort of emergency supervision, that's for me as a practicing therapist, that's a really great thing to offer. I don't believe other membership organizations, voluntary support platforms, whatever we decide to call them, offer things like that. So it's about real, tangible things that we as therapists might need. So we might need advice, we might need support, we might need some specific insight into something. We might need to understand more about a specific diverse community. We might need to tap into someone's resources about setting up a business. It could be anything. You know, and these are parts of things that I bring into training on a postgraduate level with the university. I look at all of these things that we might need as part of our personal and professional development.
And it's that layering, isn't it? And layering of awarenesses. You know, if someone's going to go into private practice, then in essence, they need to understand they're building a business.
Yeah.
And if they're building a business, then like every other business, there are certain building blocks, there are certain pillars that will hold that business in good stead. And we know from UCAS that in 2019 they estimated that over 100,000 individuals under the age of retirement were qualified at level 4 and above in psychotherapy and counselling. But when we look at the membership numbers, we don't get anywhere near that. But we also don't get anywhere near that level of engagement when it comes to the statutory organisations tapping into that, you know, to coin Vonnie's phrase, and I'm sure she won't mind, that army of therapeutic professionals.
Yeah.
You know, there is an army of professionals out there that the system is almost ignoring simply because they haven't gone down the route of the voluntary support bodies that have dominated the awareness in education, in recruitment, in employment. And when we speak to professionals that are engaged in the education side, that, like yourself, understand the component parts that are needed, and you look at what's provided as standard, you see chasms, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting to take the learning from a psychotherapy institute, teaching there, and then teaching in a university setting. It's interesting to be able to carry my therapeutic teaching toolkit over from one place to the other and really add in some things that perhaps weren't there originally, but also to bring in a little bit more unique learning. So, for example, because of my background, I might bring in some deaf awareness training. I might bring in, at certain points in the year, some disability equity training. I'm going to be bringing in what I know. And of course, that then relies on having members of staff with unique skill sets that want to share the learning for the students, well, which is great. I'm really happy to do that, but I don't think it's standard that perhaps, yesterday Viv taught us how to use an interpreter in a setting whereby you have a deaf client and what that might look like. Or yesterday Viv did a lecture on EMDR because I'm qualified and trained in EMDR. So it relies on that rather than the, you know, so it's added value. So maybe I'm bringing added value, which is great for the students.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily part of the core training. And all of these things for me are all relational matters.
And it's that, again, it's that layering of the reality of the relationship that is needed to be in place as standard, rather than the kind of the rigid, you must learn this, qualify. It's not our problem anymore if you're not able to engage with those kind of flexibilities. And by providing those layers in the learning, you have such a wide base of flexibility that, you know, to coin Wendy Dryden's phrase, you can then professionally drift.
Yeah.
And you're able to meet your client where they are, rather than hoping they're going to be able to land on the pinhead of your kind of structured knowledge.
Yeah.
When you look at kind of your career path and you look at your vast experience and your understanding of that professional drift, do you think you would be able to do that now with the education environment in the standardization model that it sits at the moment?
No.
In brief, there's a short answer for you, ladies and gentlemen.
I think everything that I've done has culminated in this. It is a vast knowledge it's incredible how I've walked this path not knowing quite where I was going, but along the way have picked up. So I've worked in private psychiatry, I've worked in hospital settings, secure units, community settings with the deaf community. I've worked within group settings, therapy, and I've utilized all of these skills and knowledge to walk this path for my own practice and to be able to kind of be very psychodynamic. I don't mean psychodynamic in the kind of training way, but a very fluid psychodynamic movement across all of these areas of practice, and then teaching and lecturing and PPD work and all of that stuff. I think the training as it stands, I mean, obviously I'm old, so, you know, hey, I've got a few years under my belt in terms of life experience too. But I think the training as it stands, wherever you go, wouldn't give you that breadth that we're talking about now, and therefore might not support you to do that. Now, you know, some people are, you know, in their early 20s, so they're going to develop those skill sets. They've made a decision to be a therapist now, and they're going to move through things and learn and develop, and that's fantastic. So yeah,
do you think,
question, Dave.
Do you think there is a greater need, and this might just be a kind of an evolutionary thing in our species, but a point of acceptance of not knowing but being open to growing is starting to become a greater kind of conscious thought pattern for students?
That's another interesting question. I think the students that I've been honoured to serve have been really open to the process. That doesn't mean to say that we haven't had our tussles or we haven't had our moments, but through some of those moments, there's been a lot of growth and development.
Yeah, it's almost about knowing that it's okay not to have all of the answers.
Yeah.
And getting comfortable with the evolution into developing those answers, rather than going, well, I'm qualified, therefore I've got the answers, and allowing for that evolution of self. And again, it comes down to that self-awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, and it comes down to recruitment, who, you know, ends up doing the training, who's on the courses, how open they might be as individuals. But for me, as a sort of teacher or a lecturer, I'm going to push that because I want people to be open.
Yeah, and
I don't want people to think, well, I've read this book, I've done this training, I've already done this, and then think they're already there, because they're not.
Yeah, and ultimately,
sorry, Dave, none of us are there yet. I think, you know, we're all on a learning journey. We're always a student, right? Always a student, sometimes a teacher.
Yeah, and I'm reminded every time we have a conversation, I'm always reminded of a lesson that I got from the Blackfoot Cherokee in Middle America, who I sat down with an amazing tribal elder who's reminded me something that they as a culture have understood for generations and centuries. The only day you have learned everything you need in your life is the day after you've died. Every other day is a learning day. And we don't have all the answers because we've still got other experiences to come.
And I also think as a lecturer or as a trainer, that's what we need to model. So when a student asks me, what's this? And I go, actually, I don't know. I will put my hands up. I will model that relational practice and say, hey, I don't know, two things. How about you go away and have a look, and I'll try and do the same. And perhaps we can bring it back into the classroom, the lecture theatre, and share the learning.
Yeah. And this is, in essence, how that relationship with a client grows, because no single professional is ever going to be able to take every single variable that a client can bring. And having that support network with the voluntary support platform, and you mentioned the emergency supervision that APA provides. And again, this is unique globally, but that's not the only kind of layer of support. And it's by putting those layers of support in that, whether it's through the exclusive peer support group, whether it is through the Open Contact Thursday, where members can directly access the executive of the organisation and ask those questions, or it's the emergency supervision. And 2 hours of emergency supervision in a year, where you might only need 10, 15 minutes.
Exactly.
It's just about making sure that the professionals know that it's safe to not know an answer.
And you know what I like about that is that all of those things that you offer as an organization are deeply relational.
Yeah.
So for me, if life is relational, everything is about relationality. So, that's, we're modeling this as therapists, we're modeling this as lecturers or teachers, and you as an organization are modeling that relational contact.
And by giving, it creates that triad of support. The therapeutic relationship is based on a triad. You've got your client, you've got the professional, and you've got the voluntary support platform.
Yeah.
And when all those three parts are working to the same therapeutic principle, amazing things happen.
Exactly.
And it's one of the reasons why, when we look at the education arena and what students are experiencing, we can see how that relationship triad doesn't come out from the standardization. It takes lecturers like yourself who will bring that third part into the mix and make sure that students who, in all fairness, the vast majority of students who sign up on a course are wounded warriors.
Or wounded healers.
And they will become wounded healers. And this is where that personal therapeutic component goes from being a wounded warrior to being a wounded healer. But if that pathway doesn't exist, because a student doesn't know or doesn't experience what those points of reference are for a voluntary support platform, other than what they are told they need to do, but no understanding of why they're told to do it, then you break down that relationship, so you will only ever have a one-dimensional relationship with a client.
Yeah, and again, ANA as an organization has done nothing but good work, in my opinion, and the things that we talk about when we do get a chance to catch up, it's amazing the work that you're doing, and certainly a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and so I've only got good things to say. And if I didn't, you'd know.
You're one of the few professionals who, I think, when APA kind of went from providing retreats to providing accreditation, you were one of those professionals that Siobhan and I spoke to who gave us the sense of what the limitations were, but also what the potential was. And it's something that neither Siobhan or I will ever forget or ever lose our appreciation of. But we're also mindful that the confidence that came out from those, for the people that were at those retreats right in the very early days, was phenomenal in its own right. And if I remember rightly, you came off of a retreat finding a component part of your own self-care that had been locked away for a while.
Yeah.
And self-care is a massive component of that personal development, isn't it?
Exactly. Don't get me on the self-care. My Peloton, all other bikes are fabulous too, I'm sure, but my Peloton has been an amazing thing for me. So it's a cycle, for anyone that doesn't know, an indoor cycle. No, I don't go anywhere. And my painting, of course, you know, for me has been, I don't know, it's just been a huge life change. And even today, you know, when we were running a bit late and you rang and I was like, oh Dave, I've got a paintbrush in my hand, can we start in half an hour, you know, because I was just finishing a piece that I was like, oh, I don't want it to dry without adding these bits in. But also on that, you know, I'm now combining my mental health awareness and knowledge and actually producing a piece of impact, social impact art, which will be on a supermarket shelf near you in October.
Oh, you see, this is what I love about APA's members when they hit the ground running in their own race rather than the race that a voluntary support platform is dictating that they run in. Is beautiful to watch. I can remember the excitement when you moved and the art started to really kick in. And now I can see, you know, exhibition after exhibition, award after award. And it's like, this is where, when you find your groove, whatever that groove is, for you, artwork has really kicked in. For me, it is creative writing, and you know, the fact that, you know, I've been able to take the first fiction book that I wrote and have produced kind of the first half of, you know, 2 movies. You know, that self-care, that kind of dedication to actually go, do you know what, this is the time I need right now, and be able to produce something that is just for us. But when we do it and we see the benefit that others get from what we've done for ourselves, it's remarkable, isn't it?
Oh, it's just incredible. I mean, I'm so excited about that project. You know, it's just, you know, it's a big company and they're, you know, willing to put a piece of my art on their product, and for me to have 500 words to say, hey, look, this is a bright and cheery, but we're not talking about bright and cheery. We're talking about, you know, how mental health can not look like you imagine.
Yeah. And when you think, I mean, the conversations that APRA have had around how do we change the evolution of mental health awareness, and you know, the idea that mental health almost causes the eyes to roll in the back of the head for a lot of people now. We've had mental health awareness for that long, yet we've not had mental health action in any kind of stretch of connection other than let's talk about being aware of mental health.
And actually what I do is bring that into the training as well and say, what are you doing to support your mental wealth?
Yeah. And it's that, isn't it? It's the wealth that that understanding and that awareness brings.
I said that on an interview with Russ Kane on the radio. I said that to him. He was like, oh, haven't heard that before. I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah. And this is, yeah, one of the things, you know, I love the conversations with the men's and women's radio stations, simply because they don't focus on the standard model of what is mental health, because mental health is a constant. And if we can kind of get away, and this is one of the things that I really love about the way you work and the way you engage, is mental health is not a raincoat that you put on when things is bad weather. Mental health is constant.
Exactly.
And it's a sliding scale as to where we are at any given point based on our resiliences and our experiences and our coping capacity, our network of support links, everything else. So when we look at how do we move that understanding into something that's tangible, and APA has the ethical and psychological awards. So those businesses and those organizations, those charities, those social groups that are actually doing things that make a difference in, as you say, the mental wealth of those they work with and those that they serve, you're able to have a very different conversation about what mental health is.
Exactly. And it's about meeting your target audience. I'm really trying to not say too much here, but the target audience that we're reaching through this product is majority male through this particular product. And it's men are unlikely, for example, to see a poster in a doctor's surgery and think, oh yes, I think I'll go to therapy. But they might pick up this product and think, oh, what's this? And then think, oh, flipping heck, I never thought about that before. Or they might know someone, or they might, you know, it might just stop and make them think. So we're bringing mental health in that case to the people that buy the product.
Yeah. And if, you know, if the individual won't go to the mountain, then the mountain will go to the individual. And you know, you look at the campaign that APA ran last year around predominantly men's mental health, but ultimately every single one of us are experiencing the same kind of concept. You know, we forget that as human beings, we will talk. We have to know that it's safe to. And for the vast majority of young people, and certainly from, I would say, the generation just before mine, the idea of talking about emotions was shut down because what the generation before that had been through. And that generational transference of isolation, of not connecting to the emotional because of what it opens up when it's uncontained, meant we stopped using these.
Yeah.
And this is where the idea of, you know, grow a pair, nah, use the pair you've got. Because when men know that they're not going to be belittled, they know they're not going to be judged, when they know that they can express what they're thinking and feeling, we do.
Yeah.
Which is why the old idea of guys going to the pub together, that was their safe space where if it got too much, if it could be laughed off and it could be put into context, and all of these things, all of that's been taken away and that space has been shut down, that these get closed. And this is the same for students.
Yeah.
They have to be taught to open these up again.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, because even when I was teaching initially, a part of that was online. And although the impact is very much, you can still have an impact, people are distracted, aren't they, by their mobile phones or by other electronic devices, or they can switch their camera off. All of that stuff can happen. Yeah. So, you know, it is really important that people open their full senses to others and their experience of mental health and wealth.
And it's that collaboration partnership between a professional and a client that is crucial.
Yeah.
Because if, you know, the voluntary support platform can provide that third support section, and, you know, an effective voluntary support platform should, in my humble opinion, be able to provide a sense of support to the client just as much as it does to the professional. And this is where I think the kind of role of a voluntary support platform is in a really unique place within the world of mental health, because it does provide, when it's effective, support to both sides.
Yeah,
I think
that's great.
That's directly and indirectly.
Yeah.
Because if the professional is supported, if the professional understands they've got that safe space for them to develop and for them to grow and develop those relationships, the work that they do with their client goes off the chart.
Exactly. Again, that relational contact with organization, and then with the therapist, and then with the client, fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, if it's powerful, it's really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is where I think the work that you're doing within the education arena to re-establish that awareness and the value of those components and those layers of experience. Because without those points of reference, who can navigate?
Yeah, and I think it's good that we have therapists who are in practice teaching. I don't think it's essential. I just think it's really, really valuable to students or to anyone that's undertaking training, that you've got that, what's it actually like to be in practice. And, you know, I speak to students now about what can I do when I finished? I'm like, wow, the work.
What can't you do?
Exactly. And that again is part of the training that I provide, is that we talk about these things. It doesn't have to be. What I say to students is your own relational history and your own drivers can inform where you end up and where you want to go and where you want to develop. Yeah.
And it's uncanny. I can remember one of the first images that Apple put together on the idea of the development for any individual. And we used the Star Wars image of Anakin Skywalker as a child and the shadow of Vader. And it's the path that you lay will create the future you walk into.
Exactly.
And you should be careful of where you lay those foundation bricks. But as solid, effective, therapeutically aware professionals, you're able to support your clients to be able to support their next generation.
Exactly.
And that's where I see the beauty. And the conversation with Siobhan in the In Conversation With series kind of picks up on that same point. It is the power that we have as professionals to influence the next generation through the work that we do with clients today and tomorrow.
Exactly.
And the more awareness we can build in, the more capable we are in our acceptance of ourselves, the more capable we are of building that acceptance of self in clients.
Exactly. And without it, I think without it you can't. You know, it's that black and white for me.
Yeah.
You can't be a good therapist that can support people to change their own lives, that can then go on to support their children or their parents even. Yeah. You cannot do that without having a solid infrastructure and understanding of your own system, of your own scaffolding, of your own stuff.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of effective education. It's the beauty of effective support networks, and it's the beauty of effective evolution. Because otherwise you've got devolution.
Yeah, Yeah.
and you go backwards.
Yeah, you've got people, maybe, I'm sure there aren't people out there like this, but people out there maybe in practice that are just not doing a great job. They're just
And
not able to do that.
yeah, you know, as APA has said, Siobhan put this up right at the very beginning of our entire existence. Self-awareness is not a coat that you put on in the room with a client and you take off when you leave. Self-awareness is constant, just as our mental wealth is. And this is where we see those professionals who experience negative interactions online from fellow peers. It's the largest complaint sector across mental health, is peer on peer disagreement.
Wow. And
that is what I would suspect comes across to the public. And I'm sure there will be research being done as to the perception the public have of the therapeutic arena. And something that strikes me as quite telling, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, is the number of people in the populace who are reaching out to coaches, and those coaches are struggling because those individual clients are needing therapy first, and then coaching. But the whole connection between what coaching and therapy is in the eye of the public means the public are avoiding the therapy, seeking coaching as an alternative, and a coaching sector that is going, we've got to hold on to these clients, when actually what they should be doing is working with the therapy sector and saying, right now, where that individual is on their evolution is at a therapeutic need. Once they've been through that, then they can get the coaching benefit. But to try and coach somebody when they actually should be having therapeutic support is counterproductive.
It is. It's actually dangerous, I think, you know, for some people to embark on thinking that it's okay to support someone with their mental health when they're not trained. I think it's dangerous.
Yeah, and this is why APA maintains that differential, because qualified accredited members are there for the therapeutic engagement. Our psychologically alert level members are coaches, other professionals that are working with psychological understanding, but they're not there providing something that they're not trained or qualified to do.
Yeah, that's another great thing that you've done as an organisation, is that you've offered these different membership levels for people to slot into, knowing that they fulfill the criteria and that it's a positive place to be.
Yeah,
it's not a band that feels less than or more than. It's a different position.
Yeah, and it has different roles, and it has different requirements. It has different benefit to the client. But I think, one of the things that I truly admire about all of the members is that they have understood not only their own self-awareness, because let's be fair, getting through the conversation of discovery to become an accredited member is in itself an acceptance of not knowing all the answers.
Exactly.
Exactly. But all of them have an understanding of the place and the skill set for where a client is at, rather than where they are at as an individual. And APA has made no bones about the fact that the organisation focuses on the quality of the client experience rather than the quantity of people that have been through the process.
Yeah.
Because just as you do with students, they come through that process equipped, ready to work, just as if they were doing any other qualification study course. You know, I can't think of any other educational environment where you qualify based on the fact that in order to study, you had to join a charity. I don't know that exists in any other educational sphere anywhere in the world except mental health in the UK. Congratulations, we're number one for funneling people to a charity. But also, when they're qualified through that process, the employment sector doesn't acknowledge them as being qualified until they've done something else to pay money to that charity. And it beggars belief that in a sector that is so focused on the benefit of understanding and congruent communication with self, that our system works counter to that.
It's really odd, isn't it? When you say it like that and you put it out like that, it sounds very peculiar, doesn't it? I was thinking there must be another profession that does this, but I can't think of any. I can't think of any.
I can tell you where it does exist within education: nursing, veterinary study.
But those are not charities that they're
exactly. That is the difference. Those sectors are regulated.
Yes.
They are dealing with the damage that can be done by the work that's done by those professionals. Yet our mental health, I can't imagine applying to a university to study an engineering degree and being told that I have to join X group of engineers, that the college has decided who they are, and if I don't join them, I can't study. I can't imagine that being allowed in any other arena.
I think what's striking for me as well is that our mental health should be number one. So our mental health, as in the whole nation, as in the world, for me, our mental health is so important.
Mm.
So why we're pushing or funneling or suggesting or coercing, I don't know what the words are here, but whilst we're doing that, what are we actually thinking about our own mental health? How are we doing that? How is it supporting that relational positivity, understanding, development? How is it doing that?
To me, it's counterproductive. But not only is it counterproductive in the moment for that student who has no point of reference to the sector, they just want to study the course. So they will only ever take the guidance of their educators. And when you've got the educators doing that coercion, either institutionally or individually, what that sets up for that individual student when they become a professional who's been given this concept that this charity is responsible for their study and for them being qualified, to then go out into a world and be told, well, actually, no, you can't apply for this job because you're not connected to that charity. It reinforces the coercion. If you were to have a client in front of you saying, I'm involved in a relationship, and one party in that relationship is telling me where I can work, when I can work, and what I can do, but I've experienced this, and this, that doesn't fit. There's something wrong in that relationship. But that's the dynamic that we're setting our students on. How are they ever going to stand on solid ground with a client who's bringing them the same dynamic and not be able to give them a congruent interaction. You've taken congruence away from them.
Yeah, I can really see that. Really
and
see that.
and this is where we see how the kind of the professionalization in the last 20 years or so has taken out the vocational flexibility and congruence and empathy. Empathy is something that's seen as, it's great if you've got it, but it's not it's not something that you have to come in with, and it's that kind of sense that we're taking away the very core of what the therapeutic relationship is based on.
Yeah, I think whatever we do as a profession, it needs to be mirrored. So what I'm doing with my relational practice needs to be mirrored in the organizations that I may have an affiliation with too. I think there's something about this way of operating that's hugely important to the client and to my supervisory relationship and to my relationships with students and to my relationship with my practice, to the wider relationships that I have. I think it needs to be part of the profession.
And I hope that as more and more people get to understand APA, get to meet Siobhan and meet our members, because obviously our members are the people that are having those interactions day to day with their clients. And the more that understanding of where the support network comes into play, and the value that APA brings to that environment, it's not just the individual relationships, is it? It's the environment in which our members are able to engage.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could literally put the phone down or put the Zoom call down to you now, and then 20 minutes later give you a call. Even though it's not Thursday, unless it is Thursday, and I don't know that. No. I know
it's always Thursday when it's called.
I know that I might not reach you, but I know that I could give you a call, and that is so important to me. I think it's quite a big leap from learning about therapy and even being challenged in PPD and understanding your own process to going out there and becoming a therapist. I think it's a big leap, and I think if organizations involved on the outside of that are contactable, and the people that are facilitating these organizations are working with this idea of relational contact and the importance of that, I think it's fantastic.
And I want to thank you for all of the work that you've done over the last few years, and certainly the support that you've given to Siobhan, myself, the organisation. There's very few kind of organisations globally that I think are as open to the feedback from people that we're connected to. And we have ambassadors, and we have our core torchbearer team, we have our membership assessment group. All of these individuals play a part in what we develop and what we're able to bring to the table to offer for professionals. But everything comes down to the support and making sure that those professionals are catered to as they require it. It's a bit like having the verbal application pathway. Well, not everyone likes filling in forms.
No.
But we can do a verbal application pathway, and that gives us that much more information than actually can be done on filling in the form.
And again, this is for me just promoting equity. So, if you can promote equity in your organization, and you can say, well, okay, that doesn't work for you, we can do it like this, or we can do it like that. I think that's fantastic. You are going to get the people that want to engage with your organization are going to be able to do it on their terms in a way that it meets their needs.
Yeah, and it is that the flexibility of the organization without fracturing the structure of the organization.
Yeah.
And being flexible. It's a bit like, you know, a colleague of mine from years and years ago, I'm talking, you know, when I started out in coaching environments, who said to me not that long ago, you've built a structure, as in APA has built a structure, that is like a willow tree. Most other trees are insistent on growing upwards and only growing upwards. APA has found a way of providing the same structure, the same support system for itself, but actually it comes down to meet everybody where they are. And that to me was a beautiful kind of representation of what APA has done.
And, you know, the roots are solid and, you know, it's still very, very strong. Regardless of the potential, because when you first said willow tree, I was like, oh, you know, movement, like, but strong tree.
Yeah, and it does come down to the structure of the organization sticking with the principles that are used in the therapeutic relationship.
Exactly.
And that's how, in, you know, we just had our 3rd birthday and we are already working in places that, you know, organizations that have been around for decades would struggle to engage with. So the kind of last kind of question to you, you've seen the evolution of the sector, you've seen the evolution of education. What is your hope for the environment in which we're looking at mental health? What's your hope for that?
I think that's a big question, but I think I've got so many thoughts running around my head as we're talking about this. I think for training and for organizations involved in the sector, I think we need to take the basic model of relational practice and we need to ensure that that model is mirrored in our organizations, you know, and mirrored in our training and mirrored to our students and mirrored in our day-to-day contact and mirrored in our teaching. I think that's the key to a successful outcome for clients, for students, for others involved in the field. Even in, you know, one-off training events or other training, it should be there. Even if, you know, you were going out as an organization to represent yourself, to represent your organization, you should be modeling it there. If you're training, you know, with a huge organization, whatever it is, because in all of the years that I've been in practice, and it is 1 or 2, I think then what we're talking about is I see that that's the only thing that works. I see that that's the only core thread, golden thread, that carries the work forward.
And it's always the interaction that's at the core. And if the interaction is always rooted in empathy, congruence, and UPR, and for those that are not comfortable, the idea of unconditional positive regard. Now, we can have a whole conversation on UPR, but ultimately, you can have all of those and all of the boundaries and all of the safety nets and all of the things that we know benefit the therapeutic engagement between professional and client. And you can have them with the client, the professional, and the voluntary support platform. And I think in 3 years, APA's proved that, yeah, you can do it in that way.
You're doing it. You are doing it, and you are securing your business in developing that further with, you know, other amazing organizations, which obviously I can't say anything about because we're having a little chat and it's being recorded.
Well,
but please know that there are lots of amazing organizations.
Yeah, we can mention the newest collaboration partner. That, you know, since we formed, collaboration partnerships has been a major part of how APA has spread the word of positive mental health through corporate.
And interrupting again, and that's again your relation, the way you go about that, your relational contact with these organizations.
And again, we stick with the principles at the therapeutic core, and the magic happens. And our latest collaboration partner, which is the Edinburgh Festival, is phenomenal. Because the team there have taken on board what the therapeutic benefit of that support can do, especially to performers. And this is another factor that I wanted to kind of touch on, is that as professionals, we have to be supported as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can't just expect to be pouring from the cup to support the client. The professional needs that too. And, you know, I think in this season of In Conversations, we've experienced a lot of how that support can play out.
Yeah. And you need to be in relationship with self to be in relationship with other. So again, it's about understanding our own mental health wealth and about recognizing what we need to fill our cup, as you said, and about how, if we don't, that has a negative relational impact on our clients. So we need to do that for ourselves too.
That's absolutely phenomenal. Viv, thank you so much for your time. It's, as always, it's an absolute pleasure. And for anybody that's watching, if you have benefited from this conversation, then get yourself the CPD questionnaire. Let us know what that benefit is, because APA does not give CPD certificates unless there is a benefit to you, your client, or the way you work. Far too long, CPD has been a tick box exercise. I watched a video, tick. That took me an hour and a half. That's an hour and a half of CPD. Thank you very much. APA wants the public to know that the work that you've done on your CPD has had value to you and to the work you do with your client. And that way, the public grow their trust and their understanding and their belief in the work of the professional.
Again, another fantastic example of relational practice, where you're asking the observer of the CPD to really engage with themselves relationally and the material that they're being presented with, and then relay that back in a relational fashion to the organization in order to secure their CPD.
And when we talked before about things making a rod for our own backs, what this does in conversation with clients, when they're explaining the processes that go on behind the scenes, it reinforces the learning, the understanding, the trust, the belief, all of the things that support that client. So another example, as you say, of how what APA does has a cascade effect in the work that's being done out in the field of therapy. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Viv, thank you again. For everyone else, take care, and we'll see you again in another conversation very,
Bye
very
bye.
soon.